Hello everyone, this is part 16 of What If Naruto Had a Proper Teacher, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
The Konoha army had sent word ahead of them and Takagakure met them in the forested area around their village. Shibuki the village leader spoke with Kakashi along with two jonin from the village and Fu the Jinchuriki of the seven-tailed Biju. Shibuki bowed deeply. "You have my thanks for answering our call for aid." Kakashi inclined his head and replied, "Hokage-sama believes in our alliances. We will gladly help defeat the Iwa invaders." Introductions were made. Shikamaru, Naruto, Sakura and Sasuke were introduced and then the two jonin and Fu were as well. Naruto looked toward Fu and smiled. "Good to meet another Jinchuriki that isn't crazy with bloodlust." Naruto paused for a moment. "You aren't actually crazy, are you?" Fu looked at Naruto oddly. She had not met any of the other Jinchuriki. The young man in front of her was taller than her and was proudly wearing a white haori that proclaimed him the son of the Yondaime Hokage. Fu smiled and said, "No, I'm not crazy. The village doesn't like me but I leave them alone and they leave me alone, so it could be worse." Naruto frowned. "Ouch, that much get lonely." Fu forced herself not to tremble and shrugged it off. "My home is beautiful, I can live with it." "You shouldn't have to," Naruto insisted. Fu didn't say anything and Shibuki interjected into the discussion. "Namikaze-san is correct. You shouldn't have to. After today hopefully the village will see that Jinchuriki are human just like they are." Polite introductions and small talk was complete. It was time to plan the battle. Iwa had not communicated anything except a rehash of the demands for unconditional surrender. Iwa's forces were several hours away so they had time. Kakashi was forceful with his plan. "Iwa will expect you to fight a defensive battle and so they will have planned for it. Instead we should confront them and try to fight in open terrain. We can march forward 2 hours and do battle in a sparsely forested area." One of Shibuki's jonin advisors scoffed at the plan. "This is foolish. Even with your help we are outnumbered. We must fight a war of attrition. We have already begun laying traps throughout the area. We will make Iwa bleed to get to our village." Kakashi listened to the man's arguments and then explained his decision. "At a basic level that would be a good strategy, however there are a number of reasons why we will do things my way. We have specially made seals that will cause tremendous damage in a wide area, however their efficacy would be diminished if there are natural barriers like trees in the way." Kakashi continued, "Naruto has a wide area jutsu that will also be effective. Within the trees it will be a series of small battles and there will not be as many shinobi in one area. By being further away from the village it will be less likely that we will lose track of some of their shinobi. Iwa ninja masters at Doton they could scatter in many directions and it will be difficult to pin down a dispersed force. Within my army I have Hyuga whose sole role in the battle will be to monitor underground movement. Again a dispersed battlefield is to our disadvantage. We are still outnumbered and," the jonin advisor began and Kakashi ruthlessly cut him off. "How many battles have you fought in? How many wars did you help end? Pardon my directness but I know what I am doing and this isn't up for negotiation. If you want our help you will follow my battle plan and we will win." Shibuki saw his advisor grow angry and cut into the conversation. "Our apologies Kakashi, we will of course follow your plan. How should our forces be arrayed against them?" They began to discuss the particulars. The majority of the Konoha shinobi would be arrayed on the left flank. The Takagakure shinobi would be deployed on the right flank. The center would be held by Team 7 and clones. Clones would also be dispersed among both groups and half of the Hyuga would also assist Shibuki's force. Fu would fight with beside her village's shinobi. Their battle plans made, they quickly marched out to confront the 1,000-strong Iwa force. There were 204 shinobi from Konoha and 163 shinobi from Takagakure. Despite being outnumbered nearly 3-1, Team 7 was confident in their chances for victory. Break asterisk. The Raikage was a man of action and therefore was in the forefront of the attack on Hino Kuni. He personally led the first attack at the border garrisons. The two squads of Chunin that were stationed there very nearly failed to send off the signal that they were under attack. The Chunin barely had time to react as the Raikage charged forward surrounded by his Reiten no Yoroi, lighting release armor. His first strike smashed a Chunin in the chest, instantly turning his body to pulp. In less than half a second he had killed another 2 Konoha shinobi. One of remaining Leaf shinobi burned the tag that would alert the village that the Land of Fire had been invaded. One kunoiki tossed a handle of kunai at the leader of Kumo, whose retaliatory punch crashed into her face with such force that it snapped her neck. The last Chunin activated one of the new seals that Sakura had created. Buried seals around the fort activated in response, and a barrier fuinjutsu surrounded the structure. The Reikage wasn't a fool, he knew that the fuinjutsu was a trap to destroy would-be attackers. He immediately put on a burst of speed and smashed into the pale blue barrier with all of his strength. Incredibly, the power behind the blow was not enough to destroy the barrier. It shivered as chakra was pulled toward the area of the attack in order to maintain the trap. Green gas inundated the area coming from the ground. In under a second, the Reikage lashed out at the barrier with a dozen blows enhanced by his lightning armor. The barrier fuinjutsu could not hold up under the assault. He burst free before the poisonous gas could pose a threat. C rushed up next to the Reikage and made sure nothing had been inhaled. C was skilled at medical ninjutsu, and after careful observation he said, "That is a nasty combination of sulfuric gas that could corrode a breathing mask in seconds. It was mixed in with a nerve gas. If you had remained in there for much longer, even you may not have survived." The Reikage growled, "Jiraiya talks about peace and makes chemical weapons. The mask is gone now and we will not let him succeed." All along the border garrisons were hit. It didn't matter whether they were guarded by Konoha shinobi or the daimyo's soldiers. It was a lighting assault that struck down dozens of shinobi and scores of soldiers. The first step was a success, not that there had been any doubt. The Reikage and the lighting daimyo had mustered a massive invasion force and had moved it into position at startling speed. Kumo had left behind most of the administrative shinobi, a large amount of the genin, and a sufficient force to guard the village itself. They had brought with them 7,000 shinobi. The bulk of the shinobi were part of the primary attack group headed for Konoha herself. They numbered roughly 5,000. 500 shinobi were tasked with purely scouting. 1,500 shinobi and 4,000 of the lighting daimyo's shoulders were heading for the capital of Hai no Kuni. With the numbers being even, the idea was that Konoha would also split their forces. If they did so, the secondary group under the command of Samui would withdraw and avoid direct conflict. The third attack group consisted of a collection of 500 shinobi from Moyagaku, village hidden in the haze, and Shimogaku, village hidden in frost. They were backed by 5,000 soldiers of the lighting daimyo. Their task was to strike at the major towns and villages of Hai no Kuni. If the attack on Konoha was less than completely successful, this would start the process of crippling the Land of Fire's economy. The Reikage felt vindicated by his actions since the end of the Third Shinobi War. Unlike all of the other villages, he redoubled his efforts to train shinobi and increase Kumo's military might. His militaristic action meant that he outnumbered Konoha significantly. While he was proud of his efforts, he knew large numbers didn't make his army invincible. Konoha specialized in Kaiten attacks that could devastate whole squads. There were several names that also kept his hubris in check. Tsunade Senju considered widely to be the most powerful kunoiki in the elemental nations despite the rise of Meita Mizukage. Jiraiya, their Hokage's name, needed no explanation. Kakashi, an S-class nin who had mastered over 1,000 jutsu. Hailed as a genius and trained personally by the Yondaime Hokage. The infamous Ino Shika Cho squad. None of them were S-class, but they had taken down S-class opponents together. Danzo Shimura was an enigma, however. If not for Hiruzen, he would have been the Sandaime Hokage. Had age brought low his cage-level power? The Reikage wouldn't count on it. He was one to be treated with utmost caution. Gaimito, Konoha's noble green beast, was someone the Reikage would have liked to spar with without his lighting armor. It would have been interesting to see who the greatest taijutsu master in the world was. If they did meet, he would use his lighting armor and Guy would his hachiman. The Reikage was confident he would win unless Guy opened up the gate of death. In that case, all bets would be off. The Chushikage had not participated in the attack on the border defenses. The old man wanted to keep his attendants a surprise until they were upon the gates of Konoha. The Reikage was still a bit surprised at Onoki's decision. It all came down to hate in the end. Onoki wanted to see Konoha burn, and he couldn't do that if he was with the army from Iwa. Break. Guy raced from the response team's base of operations back into Konoha proper and to the Hokage Tower. Distress seals had been trigged throughout Hino Kuni. They were being invaded and Jiraiya need to do no right away. It didn't take long for him to reach the Hokage, who reacted with a curse. Jiraiya gave orders swiftly and word was being sent to every major gathering and garrison of Leaf Shinobi. Jiraiya also ordered a dozen scout squads out from the village to begin gathering information on the forces attacking them. Jiraiya again summoned the village council. It was the second emergency meeting in 72 hours. Jiraiya didn't waste time. He ordered Inoiki to work with the rest of the Yamanaka to make contact telepathically with the scouts that had just been sent out, as well as any available forces throughout Hino Kuni. The first thing we need is solid information on the enemy numbers and where they are going to be striking. Hiashi murmured, such a large attack will probably mean they are coming for Konoha, assuming we had sent much of our shinobi to help our ally. In reality, Konoha had sent only a fraction of its strength to help Takagakure in terms of raw numbers. Shinobi force size was always a rather imprecise number. Half of the shinobi were not actually designed to fight. They were the genin, the administrators, the retired, the hospital staff, the theorists, and those that used their chakra to help with civilian work. Of the half that were chunin or higher that actually regularly saw combat also did all of the missions that could end in violence. This meant they were dispersed out all across Hino Kuni and beyond. Jiraiya had thousands of shinobi to call upon that were in the village right now, however most of them were not significant combat threats. All of them had gone through the academy and would be superior to a civilian soldier, but that didn't mean their utility was high. The 200 shinobi he had sent to combat Iwa's aggression was only a small fraction of the total shinobi force in Konoha, but it was a much more significant fraction of their combat-worthy shinobi. However, the real loss was felt in the absence of Kakashi and his team. Jiraiya was tempted to recall them, but he refused to allow an ally to fall. The only way his dream of peace could come to fruition was if allies actually trusted each other. A common defense that would deter aggression was his goal. This proved to be a contentious decision. Hiashi, Danzo, Choza and Hana's temporary Inuzuka stand-in wanted Team 7's immediate return. Hiashi spoke, Team 7 has proved themselves. I would be honored to fight by their side. They are 2 days away, and if the enemy is heading for Konoha, they will arrive in 2 days. They can arrive just in time, and with the strength of our heavy combat team, Konoha and all of the villages will be safe. You want to risk that for Takagakure's sake? All the elitist contempt Hiashi could muster lingered on the village named Takagakure. Danzo, glad to have an ally for once, stepped in. The village is more important than an alliance with Takagakure. Consider the number of lives that would be lost if we failed to defeat our invader. Takagakure is fraction of our size. Jiraiya was firm. We will defend the village with what we have available. I have faith in the shinobi of this village, and you should too. I will advise Kakashi to be quick about it, but there will be no more discussion. I value your input, but decisions must be made now. A steady stream of data began to be collected in the room as Inoiki made contact with shinobi on patrol and those in towns and villages near the border. Shikaku had placed a massive map of Hino Kuni in the council chambers that was being updated as frequently as possible. The greatest minds of the Leaf watched as markers indicated the number of invaders were moved and calculated. Soon they were able to tell that Hino Kuni had been invaded by Kumo as well as by Moyagakure and Shimogakure. The Hokage ordered messages sent to Suna. I want to believe Baki is still our friend, but I won't risk another village's shinobi on our soil. It is clear Iwa is working with Kumo. Send word that we ask them to honor our alliance by keeping Iwa busy. We'll handle what was sent at Takagakure, but after that it's Suna's fight. Send word to Kasagakure and see if they will honor our alliance as well and have them work with Suna. As the map updated, they could clearly see 3 large formations with different targets in mind. One was clearly headed for Konoha and another for the capital of Hino Kuni, the seat of power of the Fire Daimyo. The third formation was headed for one of the more prosperous trading towns. Based on the geography of Hino Kuni, it would be virtually impossible to intercept the force heading for the trading town. However, it would be very easy to send aid to the feudal lord. When Jiraiya brought this up, Danzo said, the Daimyo has his 12 guardians as well as his soldiers. We need to defend the village before all other considerations. Shikaku took on a thinking pose. Kumo is assuming we will send aid. Allowing the capital to fall would be disastrous to our economy and standing, but letting Kumo dictate our strategy is also a problem. The Toad Sage didn't see much choice in the matter. As Hokage, he was responsible for the defense of Hino Kuni as well as Konoha. The fire daimyo would have to be defended. He said as much to the council and some sided with Danzo. Jiraiya overruled those concerns and forcefully stated, "This is my decision. We will help defend the capital and drive back the attackers here. In both cases we will have a home ground advantage." Danzo respected Jiraiya's power and the moves he had made since becoming Hokage. Now however things teetered on the precipice of ruin. It would be dangerous to use Kotoa Matsukami with Shikaku in the area. The man's intellect would discern a change had come over the Hokage. Once Kotoa Matsukami was detected, it was simply a matter of willpower to break the suggestion. The key to success was never allowing the victim to be aware that their thoughts were being influenced. Danzo did not know the Raikage's assessment of him, but the Raikage's assessment was correct. Danzo was a cage-level fighter. However, much of his strength could not be used in the open without dire ramifications for his position in Konoha. His choice became clear. Hokage-sama, you rule Konohagakure and it is your choice. If I cannot dissuade you, allow me to take root and only root with me to defend the capital. The integration of root into the rest of the village has not been as successful as you hoped, and they will regain all of their operational effectiveness if you allow me to take them all with me. Jiraiya was instantly suspicious. There are only about 40 root operatives in the village. What could you hope to accomplish with just your personal army? Why do you not want others with you? Danzo responded calmly, I intend to use Kinjutsu to be victorious. Other shinobi may not understand or would get in the way. What Kinjutsu? Jiraiya growled. Danzo raised a hand in a placating manner. It will not be the Edo Tensei since I do not know that jutsu. I will tell you no more. Ask your advisor if splitting our forces down the middle will likely lead to a victory here in Konoha. Do this and you have a much better chance of defending the village. I swear to you now that I will die before the fire daimyo falls, and let all the clan leaders hear me. If I fail, you may have my life, Hokage-sama. Jiraiya glanced at Shikaku, who was furiously thinking about all of the different variables regarding the invasion and Danzo's possible motivations. Finally he said, Jiraiya, based on the numbers facing the village and working under the assumption most of them are shinobi, we need as many of our own shinobi we can get here in the village. If Danzo believes he can turn back the attack on the capital with just root and is willing to stake his life on it, then my advice is that we let him. Jiraiya was unhappy but reluctantly agreed to it. Very well, Danzo. If you are playing a game, know that there is nowhere you can run that I won't be able to find you. Kakashi will also know all that transpired here. Danzo bowed his head and turned and left. He truthfully intended to stop the invasion. He had a plan in mind. Much depended on who the commander of the Kumo force was. Summoning his operatives was a simple matter. Despite the integration efforts, all of Root's loyalty was firmly with Danzo. They quickly set off for the capital. At a moderate speed they would arrive in more than enough time. Back at the council chamber, which had been tuned into their strategy room, Jiraiya continued putting the defense of Konoha together. Bring Anko and Iruka here, the Hokage ordered. Soon the two arrived. The Hokage swiftly informed them of the invasion size and their route. I want the both of you to lead half a dozen ambush squads and slow the invaders down. Use traps, hit and run attacks and whatever other devious ways you can think of to hurt the invaders. You know the land better than they do, but be careful. This is an S-rank mission, but this is not a suicide mission. I want both of you alive and back here when the attack on Konoha begins. Anko let a feral grin slip onto her face. This should be fun, Hokage-sama. Iruka looked far more nervous than Anko, but he had come a long way thanks to the extra training he had been convinced to take on. The Hokage wished them luck and turned back to the map of Hinokuni to see what updates had been made. Break asterisk. Naruto looked out at the battlefield. He had created 50 clones for the battle and 2 additional clones that were gathering nature chakra. Currently the real him was also gathering nature chakra. He intended to start the fight in Sage mode and do as much damage as possible before it faded. From there he would fight normally until he came across a dangerous foe and pop one of the clones to transform into Sage mode again. Sakura was confident and ready for the fight, however she was a bit queasy about her newest seals. What was about to happen would probably change how warfare was conducted in the elemental nations. Half of her wanted her seals to be a complete success so that her and her allies would win easily with minimum casualties for her village and friends. The other half wanted them to fail because of what it would herald in the wars of the future. Sasuke was just ready. He longed for battle and a chance to bring glory to the name Uchiha. The long months training with little action had made him antsy. He looked over at his comrades and gave them a grin. There were very few individuals who he wanted to fight besides, but those three were definitely worthy. Kakashi looked across the battlefield and readied himself for the slaughter. Team 7 had grown significantly since their first battle with Iwa. Sakura in particular was about to unleash hell with her seals. When the battle was almost ready to begin, he heard Inoki's voice inside his head. Kakashi, Hino Kuni is under attack from Kumo. The Hokage wants you to complete your task there and then return home. Do not overly endanger your forces or Takagakure, but press for a quick resolution sooner than later. Kakashi mentally responded, how bad is it? There was a pause and Inoki replied, it's bad, but I have dozens more messages to send. Understood, I'll let Shikamaru and my team know. Kakashi relayed the information. They kept the information away from the rest of their shinobi. It would not be good for morale for their ninja to be worried about home in the middle of the fight. Focusing back on the looming battle, he saw Iwa was almost in range. He signaled Naruto, who summoned Gameiken. At this distance it was now obvious to Iwa that either Jiraiya himself or Naruto was in the battle. Kakashi saw Iwa respond by summoning Atratus the Dark Vulture and several massive bears. Gameiken rumbled, I may be clumsy, but I'll do my best. Iwa continued to advance and Kakashi again signaled Naruto. The clones led the charge with both flanks trailing slowly behind them. Naruto was at the head of his clone army. Predictably, Iwa unleashed a wave of Doton Jutsu and projectiles at Naruto and the clones. Naruto blasted the projectiles aside with contemptuous ease using his futon jutsus. In Sage mode, his ninjutsu was more powerful and he could mold the chakra and hand seals faster. The clones focused on dodging the earthen dragons, rivers of mud and spikes that attempted to dissipate them. Now they were in range and they opened the modified kunai scrolls. In the face of a swarm of projectiles, the obvious response was to use Doton, Doruheiki, Earth Release, Mud Wall. Predicting this in advance of the specially made kunai scrolls, Naruto unleashed a massively overpowered futon, Daytopper, Wind Release, Great Breakthrough. The nature-enhanced over-chakra-infused ninjutsu smashed the walls down, allowing the swarm of 40 kunai per scroll to fly into the ranks of the Iwa shinobi. But that's not where it ended. Every single one of those kunai had been etched with kanji that was used in storage seals. Those kunai exploded with a variety of effects. Some had shrapnel, others had more kunai with explosive tags, and still others had combustible gas that was further triggered by the explosive tag variety. Fuinjutsu seals were also on some of the kunai that had been expelled from the original kunai. This further provoked a chain reaction that turned the heart of the Iwa formation into a mass of shrapnel, corrosive gas, kunai and explosive tags with yields 10 times greater than the standard. And even at that point it wasn't done, as kunai and shrapnel that came from the second set of Fuinjutsu sealed kunai also had even more Fuinjutsu seals on them. The amount of metal, chakra paper, ink and gas that had been used had cost more than a few S-class ranked missions. However, their effect was awe-inducing. Any shinobi without a Kekkei Genkai, the foresight to tunnel underground to escape, or were at the edges of the chain reaction of explosions, gas and kunai were dead. Takagakure and Konoha forces began to advance in earnest. Cohesion among Iwa was severely undermined as 200 shinobi had just been annihilated. Break. Kitsuki's first reaction after surviving the onslaught was relief that he had ordered his daughter to the rear of their formation, overseeing the medical nin and genin corps. His second thought was horror at the devastation that had been wrought among his friends and allies. His third thought was that he had to do something before the battle turned into even a larger massacre. He took a quick stock of the battlefield and saw the bears had been shredded by the attack. Han was still standing, of course, as were several of the smarter shinobi who had used the Doton Jutsu to move underground. The flanks were staring at the devastation and were ill-prepared for the main force of Takagakure and Konoha shinobi bearing down on them. He roared out orders and through sheer force of will demanded they ignore the death around them and fight. They still outnumbered the enemy. The battle was not lost. He had little time to continue rallying his men when Naruto Namikaze slammed into him. His hasty Doton, Kengan no Jutsu, Earth Release, Fist Rock technique coated his arm and would normally have blocked the blow easily. However, Naruto was different and far stronger than he had been previously. The rock shattered beneath Naruto's attack and Kitsuki was thrown backwards. Naruto didn't give him more than half a second to get his bearings from the sudden attack. He was on him in an instant and only a desperate Kawarimi saved him from the earth-shattering blow. Somehow Namikaze knew exactly where he had subsisted to and sent a futon-charged kunai directly at him. Kitsuki couldn't completely dodge in time and the kunai sliced into the upper part of his shoulder painfully. The wound wasn't significant but it would bleed. Han came to his aid, steam billowing around him. Naruto clashed with the other Jinchuriki and the indomitable Han was shockingly driven back. More Iwa shinobi entered into the fray and Naruto had to deal with them. Kitsuki used the time to create a pair of mud clones. With growing horror he watched the son of the Yellow Flash draw his katana and massacre the Iwa Jonin and Chunin who had come to his aid. He couldn't detect a whiff of demonic chakra but the boy was moving with blinding speed and power. Han may have been driven back but he was far from defeated. However, the rest of the Team 7 had now arrived. Kakashi's Chidori neatly killed one of his clones. The other clone put up a mud wall to block a stream of shuriken that Sasuke had rained down with vicious power. Kitsuki couldn't even spare a glance at the larger battlefield as the most deadly team in Konoha brought the battle to him. Break. Kuretsuki saw what had happened to the front of their formation. She had never known why all of Iwa had hated the Yellow Flash so much but now she had an idea. How many lives had been snuffed out in an instant? Was that what the previous war had been like? Dozens of comrades dead in an instant without any defense. She knew her father was in the heart of those explosions. She knew he was tough but she had to make sure. She ran off toward the carnage. Akatsuki called out, "Wait Kuretsuki, your father ordered you stay and guard the medical nin. Don't try to stop me, I'm going to make sure he's okay." Akatsuki knew trying to argue with the Chushikage's granddaughter was a losing proposition and so quickly hurried after her. Onoki would never forgive him if he let his granddaughter die. Break. Itachi and Kisame watched the battle. Once it had become clear that Naruto was among the Konoha shinobi, Itachi knew he had to act. He didn't have much time left and he had to have his confrontation with his brother soon. He turned to Kisame and said, "Can you handle the Nanabi on your own?" Kisame grinned, displaying his shark-like teeth. "Of course. I'll keep the rest of Konoha busy. I'm sure my brother will go after me when he knows I'm here. If he does stay out of the fight." Kisame gave him a level look. Itachi was playing a game that didn't serve the Akatsuki's interests. He wasn't stupid but he was loyal to his partner. He would let him play his games. He enjoyed their partnership and if he wanted to fight his little brother that was fine by him. Kisame put on a burst of speed and headed for where the Takagakure nin were taking the fight to Iwa. Itachi suspected Sasuke would be in the thick of things but he needed to draw him away from the heart of the battle. He disliked harming Leaf Shinobi, especially in the midst of a major battle, but what he had to impart to Sasuke was too important. Carefully guarding his chakra signature and presence under a genjutsu, he stalked toward the Konoha lines. Naruto felt nearly invincible in Sage mode. He had butchered the enemy Jonin and Chunin that had come to Kitsuki's defense with laughable ease. Speed was his main advantage, but wielding a blade, now finally with the skills of a real swordsman, that could cut through steel and rock in a blink of an eye was an absurd advantage. His slashes ripped through opponents regardless of the Doton jutsu they tried to use to shield themselves. Being in tune with nature also allowed him to sense any opponents using Doton, Shinjuzanshu no Jutsu, Earth Style, Headhunter Jutsu, to try to come up from under the ground. One poor Chunin learned that the hard way as he was skewered even before he finished rising up from the ground. The real threats in the area were Han and Kitsuki. Gameiken had lumbered forward and was now engaging some of the other Iwa shinobi who were attempting to rally around their leader. A massive toad in the middle of a battlefield without an opposed summon was deadly difficult to overcome. Kakashi had annihilated the second mud clone and stalked after Kitsuki. Kitsuki was a wily opponent who used a barrage of Doton jutsu in rapid succession, forcing Kakashi to use Kawarimi to avoid the techniques. It was a losing proposition in the long run, however, since Kawarimi took little chakra while a Doton, Dosekiru, Earth Style, Earth Dragon, took a considerable amount even with his affinity for Doton jutsu. Sasuke and Sakura worked in deadly tandem. Her genjutsu were hard to detect and they seemed to instinctually know who each other were targeting. A simple genjutsu to mask a shuriken killed just as quickly as a reikiri after all. Not that Sasuke stinted on jutsu. His new favorite was an even longer extension to Chidori Iso, Chidori Spear. At 80 feet in length he could sweep the modified lighting blade across the battlefield at terrifying speed, cutting enemies in two that didn't react with Jonin level speed. And again Sakura helped cloud the senses of opponents with her genjutsu so they didn't even sense the deadly Raten before it cut them in half. After dealing with the first wave of Jonin and Chunin, Naruto faced off with Han, used Sage Mode to gain the upper hand. The steam armor was stubborn and even his futon blade couldn't pierce through it. However, Han was being battered around from the Senjutsu enhanced blows. Demonic chakra began to leak and he quickly transformed into version 2. Dark red and black chakra coated him and Naruto knew the fight had just been ratcheted up a notch. Naruto dodged a strike and responded with a bisecting cut that slammed into the rival Jinchuriki. The blow again knocked Han back but failed to pierce the thick chakra cloak. Kakashi had said that in this form a Jinchuriki was nearly invincible until their chakra was exhausted. At this point in the battle the 5 minutes of Sage Mode was nearing an end. Kakashi signaled Naruto to begin the second phase of the destruction of the Iwa invasion force. Naruto dropped out of Sage Mode and instantly spammed 40 clones to keep Han busy. The rest of the battlefield had not been idle. The army under Shikamaru had charged toward the flummoxed Iwa force, but instead of wading into close combat they had unleashed Kaiten Jutsu and ranged attacks. Naruto had left a couple of clones behind to use Futon Jutsu to enhance the Kaiten ninjutsu used. The flames and kunai as well as general confusion from the vicious attack at the center of their lines caused them to back away from Shikamaru's forces. Which was exactly what Naruto had wanted and Kakashi had planned for. He embraced the Kyuubi chakra briefly and used the Shunshin to get into position. There he began the lengthy series of hand seals needed. Ominous chakra filled the air. With vicious precision Naruto made sure Atratus, the damned genjutsu using Vulture, would also be caught in the attack. Naruto let out a great shout and finished his jutsu, Futon, Sora Tonkachi, Wind Release, Sky Hammer. The air pressure slammed into Atratus, instantly pulping his body. In less than a second later it smashed into the center of the Iwa contingent facing off against the Konoha contingent. Those caught at the center of it died instantly from the pressure. Those at the edges were thrown off their feet in all directions, killing some and severely wounding others. Naruto had used this jutsu to help the Konoha side of the battlefield, not out of some desire to favor them over their allies' forces but because he knew he could count on Shikamaru and the Leaf Shinobi to act appropriately. None of the Konoha shinobi had broken formation and so none were injured from the attack. In addition, Shikamaru had been waiting for that precise moment and had quickly ordered an all-out charge after the Sky Hammer had struck. With the Iwa army being even further disoriented, deafened and demoralized, they slaughtered the Iwa shinobi with disturbing ease. While the attack was normally draining, he had used the Kyuubi chakra and so his own chakra reserves were actually still considerable. He created an additional 40 clones to help Shikamaru's forces and then returned back to his fight with Han. Han had ripped apart his clones and Sasuke had to help keep him contained. Sasuke had tried multiple versions of the Chidori but none could pierce the heavy chakra cloak that surrounded Han. Naruto popped one of his extra Senjutsu gathering clones and returned to the fight with a vengeance. Break. Hana Inuzuka had waited patiently for her role in the upcoming battle. She was a medical nin but also a Jonin-level taijutsu fighter. As soon as the Sky Hammer had crashed into the Iwa lines, it was her time to shine. She raced forward with her dogs and ripped into the Iwa lines. Her ferocity would have made her mother proud. Her blood was up and she put down wounded Iwa nin with no mercy. Owagaku was the aggressor, they had broken the peace. When an animal went rabid and couldn't be cured, the only merciful thing was to put it down, and Iwa had gone rabid. Did they really think that Konoha would allow them to strike at their allies? Hana was sick of war and battle. But that just made her resolve greater as she decimated her enemy. In her area it was more a slaughter than a battle as she led the charge. Some Iwa shinobi were trying to rally and she attacked those strong points. Again and again she used the Inuzuka clan jutsus, making sure the wounded Iwa army on this flank of the battle would not be able to coordinate at all. Break. Juichiro Suzumari found himself on the flank that was fighting with the Takagakure shinobi. The proud son of Juro was eager to make up for the shame his father had brought on their clan. Regardless of the circumstances of the trap Konoha had laid for them, the bottom line was that Juro had returned without the hated Namikaze's head. He would make up for that shame by personally capturing the waterfall's Jinchuriki. However, there were setbacks. First was the vicious string of explosions and shrapnel that had cut through their central lines. That had shaken the shinobi under him. He had to force them to focus on the enemy in front of them and not worry about the dead comrades. The shinobi from Takagakure weren't anything special. They had a mixture of Kaiten and Doton users, but most of their rank and file were middling shinobi at best. Juichiro had a bodyguard of 3 jonin with him at all times, which allowed him to cut through their ranks like a hot knife through butter. That was until they encountered the 7-tailed beast. Their opponent looked human except for the oddly translucent wings that allowed her to avoid the vast majority of the Doton attacks with ease. She blinded them and cut Iwa shinobi down with agile swipes of her kunai. Iton, one of the bodyguards his father had procured for him, nearly lost his life, but Juichiro had been able to use the ground beneath his feet to pull him down to avoid the vicious slash. The Suzumari heir was driven back himself by a stream of fire that he had to hastily guard against with Doton, Doruheiki, Earth Release, Mud Wall. Snarling in frustration, he realized that the battle wasn't going his way. He had been able to cut through the trash with his jonin guards, but the rest of his forces were bogged down fighting in close quarters. Things were looking grim when the Takagakure lines began to break. Using his Kekkei Genkai, he sensed what was causing it. A large man, obviously highly dangerous, had ripped through a dozen waterfall shinobi. The weight and footsteps didn't match anyone from Iwa, and so Juichiro couldn't help but wonder who was assisting them. The man burst through another 3 enemy shinobi as he came into view. Kisame Hoshigaki was immediately recognizable. There weren't many missing nin as infamous as he was. Does Kisame have a grudge with Takagakure? He was confused but grateful for the reprieve. Fu raced off to face the new threat, and then the battlefield around Kisame became entirely enveloped in water. Juichiro was caught at the edges of the watery sphere and quickly swam out of it. He wasn't about to enter into the watery sphere where his Doton jutsu would be limited. Instead, he and the rest of his guards began striking out at the now disheartened Takagakure shinobi. A distant shockwave told them that the real threat facing them wasn't going to be from Takagakure but from the damned Leaf Village. Break. Shikaku was being pulled in multiple directions. He had to keep an eye on the updates the Yamanaka clan was feeding the map in case the situation on the ground changed. He also had to organize the defense of Konoha. Everyone would need to fight, potentially even the genin and those who normally weren't combat shinobi. They had a large amount of extra first-generation kunai scrolls that Sakura had created. Shikaku would provide those to the genin to give them a decent weapon. While most chunin could survive one of those scrolls, it wasn't a sure thing, and it certainly was a massive distraction in the middle of a fight. Shikaku also had to reconfigure squads and make sure everyone was positioned in the best place possible. Tsunade, for example, would not be tasked with healing since she needed to be on the front lines. Guy's team had been trained to hunt down the S-class criminal Kisame, and so putting him up against one of Kumo's S-class ranked shinobi would be a good choice. Little things were important, like making sure the Sarutobi clan and other Kaiten specialists were not close to the Aburame fights. Making sure the Hyuga clan was evenly dispersed to watch for infiltrators. The new defensive seals on the village itself had to be taken into consideration, as well as the number and type of traps that would be set. Simply because they approached the village from one direction didn't mean they couldn't circle around to hit the other side or simultaneously attack all sides. Shikaku was awash with information as he worked with Jiraiya to put the best possible defense plan in place. Amidst all of those concerns, he couldn't help but worry about his son, who was probably right now at that very moment fighting against the army from Iwagakure. Break. The battle was going exceedingly well in Shikamaru's eyes. It was difficult to tell what was going on with Team 7 in the middle, but demonic chakra was being felt. The earlier fears of the Chushikage and both Iwa Jinchuriki being on the battlefield were unfounded. As long as Team 7 could deal with Han and whoever was leading the Iwa forces, the battle was as good as won. And then something unexpected happened. His keen senses saw a squad of Konoha shinobi collapse next to him. His instincts screamed for him to move, and he quickly used a kawarimi to substitute away from his location. A good thing he had a shuriken that he had not seen would have struck his legs if he had been a tenth of a second slower. A Naruto clone was not so lucky and had dissipated. Ino, Choji, Rock Lee and the remaining Naruto clone turned to see Itachi Uchiha. Shikamaru's eyes had widened in utter shock. Of all the battle plans he had made, this was one occurrence he hadn't foreseen. What the hell? Itachi freaking Uchiha is working with Iwa. No, that doesn't make any sense. Shikamaru had no time to think as Itachi moved with sure strides that was almost hypnotic to watch. No scratch that it was hypnotic. Shikamaru snapped out of the genjutsu and hurried over to Ino to snap her out of it too. Choji had also been caught and was there helpless to stop the kunai from perforating his stomach. No. Choji. Shikamaru launched his shadows at Itachi, who disappeared into a flock of crows. Shikamaru again moved on instinct and avoided being stabbed as well. He countered with his own kunai and in a fraction of a second he had parried 2 blows, however the third would strike true if the Naruto clone hadn't slashed down at that moment. Itachi, with a frightening display of economy of motion, shifted slightly allowing the attack to pass by. Shuriken by the dozens flew at the clone at close range. The clone tried to use futon, repusho, wind release, gale palm, but Itachi was too fast and the distance was short for him to get it off in time. The clone dissipated and Shikamaru successfully used Kajime no Jutsu, trapping the deadly S-class shinobi. Ino threw a pair of kunai directly at Itachi's throat and chest. In disbelief, Shikamaru saw the clone exploded into a flock of crows. Itachi reappeared behind Ino and leveled a sharp blow to the back of her neck, either killing her or knocking her unconscious. Shikamaru had never felt this outclassed before. He flushed chakra to try to break a potential genjutsu, but reality was staring right in from him. Choji was bleeding out and Ino was down and may even be dead. Rock Lee valiantly raced at Itachi attempting to stop the blow, but he had been too late. Itachi easily sidestepped him and then trapped him in a genjutsu. Shikamaru called out for assistance as Rock Lee began striking at allied shinobi with reckless abandon. The Nara clan heir used his clan jutsu again to trap Lee and then pushed chakra into him, forcefully destroying the genjutsu. In the time it took Shikamaru to do that, Itachi had dropped a squad of Leaf Nin who had come to assist. Could nothing stop this monster? He was using barely a trickle of chakra with his attacks. Just genjutsu and minor clones. He knew Team 7 was now aware of Itachi's presence. He only hoped they would get here in time before the Leaf forces under his commander were completely decimated. Break. Naruto had been fighting Han again, trying to wear down the more tenured demon container. In Sage mode he was easily able to dance around the transformed Jinchuriki. However, he had yet to deal a truly lethal blow on him. His companions were around him decimating the Iwa forces attempting to come to Kitsuki's aid. Naruto had just delivered a devastating kick to Han when the clone that was next to Shikamaru popped. Long practice made sure he didn't react to the surprising news, keeping his mind on the fight. The news, however, was something he had to share with Kakashi. He called out to his sensei. Itachi just arrived on the battlefield and attacked Shikamaru's command squad. He's going to tear them to pieces. Kakashi danced back from another powerful Doton Jutsu Kitsuki sent toward him. Kitsuki would have long been dead now if it wasn't for the reinforcements that kept streaming in. They were killing him as they arrived, so that fight was proceeding well, but this news changed everything. Kakashi knew Itachi was probably one of the greatest shinobi the Leaf had ever produced. He was a master at genjutsu even without his Sharingan. His speed, taijutsu and all-around competence in every ninja art made him an enemy Kakashi himself may not be able to defeat. That was the whole point of having 2 elite squads trained to defeat him using numbers and pre-planned tactics. Kakashi weighed each of his team's abilities. None of them could face Itachi alone. Naruto was actually in the best shape to do it. With Sage mode he didn't even have to open his eyes in order to sense where Itachi was. On the other hand, he was running low on nature chakra and only had 1 clone full of it left. Sasuke had the Sharingan, so could potentially resist some of the Sharingan tricks that Itachi could use. Kakashi was tempted to go himself, but he worried about Kitsuki and Han together. Kitsuki was a veteran of a lot of battles and had the experience edge on his team. He had Kitsuki's number and there was little the man could do to present a challenge to Kakashi. That might not be the case for the others. Ultimately, Naruto and Sasuke were the best choices. Sakura could help him deal with the reinforcements with her genjutsu and he would have to deal with Kitsuki and Han. All of this was processed through his mind in less than 2 seconds. He barked out orders. Naruto, summon the rest of the battle toads here and then you and Sasuke deal with Itachi. Naruto shoved a nature-infused Rasengan into Han's gut, sending him flying back for the umpteenth time. He flashed through the hand seals and summoned Gamabunta. The majority of the Sage Chakra had run out and he used the last of it to sprint away from Gamabunta and summon Gamahero. Naruto dropped out of Sage mode and used purely his own chakra to summon another 40 clones to give Kakashi and Sakura some breathing room. Then he and Sasuke blazed through the battlefield for Shikamaru's last known location. Kakashi attempted to finish off Kitsuki before dealing with Han, but the wily Iwa commander subsisted with his own rock clone. Kunai with explosive tags trailing them were thrown by two Iwa Chunin, but Kakashi simply threw a pair of his own kunai, neatly deflecting them away. While he was throwing, he was also moving toward Han. Han roared in primal rage. It was somewhat miraculous that the Jinchuriki could still tell friend and foe in his current state. Kakashi danced around the creature's blows. More Iwa shinobi entered the battle area, and one sent out a particular dangerous, Doton, Dosekiru, Earth-style, Earth Dragon. Kakashi manipulated the fight with Han in a way that caused the Earth Dragon to smash into the five-tailed host. The Naruto clones descended with a vengeance on the reinforcements, cutting several down. Sakura continued to use her genjutsu to confuse her opponents. Like her work with Sasuke, the Naruto clones seemed to instinctually know who she would befuddle. Their teamwork had been honed to such a fine point they could almost sense each other's thoughts. Sakura knew the battle was going to be much closer now that Naruto and Sasuke had left to pursue Itachi. She didn't dare spend a single moment worrying about them. The battle was chaotic in the extreme, and one small misstep could be fatal. As if her thoughts were prophecy, she sensed chakra underneath her feet. An Iwa Nin rose out of the ground, thrusting his tanto at Sakura. Sakura was on a team of taijutsu powerhouses. She wasn't at their level in taijutsu, which was a fact. But she did spar with them every day, and in those battles they had to work for their win. That meant that the Iwa Nin who thought he was assassinating a genjutsu specialist had the tables reversed quite suddenly. Sakura blocked the attack, pushing the blade off course, and then immediately countered with her own kunai to the throat. The overconfident shinobi hadn't expected a counterattack and paid with it for his life. Sakura kicked the corpse away and then dodged a Doton, Doryuso, Earth Release, Earth Flow spears, that erupted underneath her feet. Before she could retaliate with genjutsu, Gamahiro brought down his blades on the Doton user. Sakura turned and saw Gamabunta kick into another group of Iwa shinobi. Gamaken used his Sasumata on Han, but the Jinchuriki was a bit too fast for the weapon to strike home. The great battle toads of Mount Myoboku were making their presence felt. Kakashi created a pair of lighting clones to help distract Han and hopefully allow one of the toads to pin the seemingly invulnerable beast down. Meanwhile, he tried again to finish Kitsuki. A fresh group of Iwa reinforcements arrived, and Kitsuki's face betrayed a flash of fear. Kakashi saw the arrival and immediately put the family resemblance together. Kitsuki's daughter Kuretsuki had just arrived. Konoha didn't know all the specifics, but she was rumored to be a prodigy and had a Kekkei Genkai that could make her dangerous. But her father had a flash of concern, and for a shinobi of his caliber to show his emotions, that must mean he's terrified. He knows she's not ready for an opponent like me. Kakashi called out to Kitsuki, "I see it's a family reunion. Is Onoki hiding under a rock too?" Kakashi rarely spoke in battle, but this time he had a very specific purpose. He wanted Kitsuki to understand that he knew exactly who the young woman was. He tossed a pair of kunai at Kitsuki and then put a burst of speed, making a beeline for the man's daughter. Kitsuki shouted out, "No, get back." Kitsuki dashed forward using the shunshin. The shunshin was a fantastic supplementary ninjutsu that used chakra to push a shinobi forward. It was not a teleportation technique like Kawarimi, and it certainly wasn't anything like the Hiraishin. Normally the shunshin operated fast enough that a shinobi wasn't really vulnerable as they moved with incredibly speed in a straight line, but Kakashi had been waiting for this, and his Sharingan had picked up the telltale traces of chakra beginning to form the shunshin the instant it had started. Kakashi pivoted sharply and slammed chakra into his feet, slashing forward with a Reikiri that formed in an instant. Kakashi wasn't going after Kuretsuki. His target all along had been Kitsuki. In a moment of parental love, he had left himself vulnerable, and Kakashi ruthlessly exploited it with his personal lightning jutsu that slammed through his heart, killing Kitsuki instantly. The son of Onoki Chushikage of Iwagakure was dead. Break asterisk. Anko and Iruka had hastily formed up with the 24 Anbu that were assigned to them. She divided them up into two groups. Team A would be with her and would work on the hit and run tactics, while Team B would begin setting up all manner of wonderful traps. The seals that Sakura had created made Anko just giddy about seeing them in action. Even the seals that originally didn't function properly in Sakura's eyes were a boon to Anko. One example was a Fuinjutsu seal that was supposed to store chakra for someone to use. Unfortunately, no one had been able to figure out how to actually take in the chakra outside of the standard food pill process. Worse was that the seals slowly bled chakra over the course of a few days, so it made stockpiling them impossible. But Anko's devious mind had a use for them. Because they leaked chakra, it would be sensed by Kumo scouts and senses. So Anko had Aruka and other Anbu randomly attach the seals to some fixed locations like trees and rocks. They scented their traps around those locations as well. But in addition to that, she also had them stick them to wild animals and birds who would roam around randomly bleeding chakra, which would set off false signals to the Kumo invaders. The traps that were being laid out varied quite a bit. Some were as simple as poisoned makibishi, pit traps, explosive tags that triggered based on pressure, and of course modified smoke bombs with poisonous gas. The traps were sometimes concealed naturally, but other times they were covered with magen, kokoni arazu no jutsu, demonic illusion, false surroundings technique. Anko liked to vary it. One of her more amusing traps was an obvious trap that was not concealed and had no genjutsu. Many shinobi would wait and try to decipher what trick there was that they weren't seeing, while all along there was nothing to it. Yes, Anko loved her little psychological games, which was why she made an excellent interrogator. Yet another seal allowed her to place snakes in a form of stasis that would trigger by mere proximity. Anko placed several of her unintelligent snake summons in those scrolls. By themselves they wouldn't be too dangerous, but the unexpected surprise might kill a few shinobi. Anko was under no delusions that they could stop the advance with traps and guerrilla tactics. But it did force the invaders to make a choice. Slow down and avoid the traps, or take casualties. Instructions given to Team B, she took Team A forward at a swift pace. With the invaders now just shy of 2 days away, they needed to travel for the greater part of the day to intercept. Then they would set up a number of traps and then start striking at the invaders. The plan would be to fade back into the trapped areas to discourage pursuit or to kill more cloud shinobi. Anko looked at Aruka. She never would have thought that after Orochimaru that she would find love. His sensory abilities would be key to surviving this. She would do everything in her power to make sure he survived one way or another. She kept those thoughts to herself, since if it came down to it, the nobleman would argue that he should be the one making sure she lived. Pushing those thoughts aside, she hurried on so she could be in place for her first clash with Kumo. Break. Kuretsuki had disobeyed her father's orders in order to make sure her father was okay. Only to see him brutally killed with a lighting jutsu to his chest in an evident attempt to protect her from harm. Guilt and rage warred through her mind as she processed what had just occurred. She reacted with white-hot fury and immediately used Yoten, Sekaigyo no Jutsu, Lava Release, Quicklime Jutsu, on Kakashi. Kakashi simply substituted out of the way of the attack with a piece of debris next to an Iwa Chunin, who he killed with a kunai to the throat before re-engaging the Iwa Jinchuriki. Kuretsuki had tears running down her face. Revenge was the only thought that filled her mind. Akatsuki grabbed her arm forcefully. Stop right now. The normally jovial Jonin of Iwagakure had put on a stern demeanor. Don't throw your life away against the copycat nin. He killed your father. What makes you think you'll survive the fight with him? Kuretsuki glared at her protector. I have to do something. It's my fault. He was trying to save me. Then do what he wanted you to do. Stay with the medical nin and genin. If the enemy attacks there, they will need your protection. Kuretsuki almost decided to argue, but she could not deny what her father's last wishes would have been. One day, however, she vowed she would get revenge on Sharingan no Kakashi. With a final hate-filled glare, she turned her back on her father's killer and went back to her post. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.